Step 1. Get started by laying out your fence line. When planning your layout, it is generally best to begin at the endpoints. Endpoints are the posts that are installed against your home or other structure. The maximum spacing between two posts is 14 feet. Our kits assume your layout will use a 14-foot post spacing. So, from the endpoint, you can measure up to 14 feet away and set the next post. When planning endpoints, they are best placed 32 inches or more from corners of buildings and structures. This ensures the spring-loaded arm is fully flat against the building. If you do not have 32 inches of offset as shown in the previous diagram, then you should place your post in the corner as shown. In this situation, be prepared to add 2 spring-loaded arms on a single post to create a double endpoint. Since our kits assume 14-foot post spacing, if you choose shorter spacing due to space limitations or for added durability, you may require extra posts which are available separately. You can then continue laying out your posts with appropriate spacing. When corners are needed, 90-degree angles are ideal. However, any angle can be accommodated with the system so long as the angle is between 90 and 270 degrees. These examples show how different angles look in the layout. If your layout calls for a corner that is less than 90 degrees, then you will need to cut it short and create 2 corners greater than 90 degrees using an additional post. Be sure to keep these principles in mind as you think through how you will lay out your enclosure. Begin by laying out your perfect fence line by marking post locations on the ground. Use cups, rocks, cones, stakes, or anything else that can help you mark post location. Use a traditional tape measure or open reel tape measure to ensure your post spacing is correct. The maximum distance between posts should be 14 feet or less. Using shorter spans can lead to greater durability over time. Do your best to exclude items from the enclosure that cats may use to leap from or climb on, such as AC units, chairs, bushes, benches, etc. How to address hills, slopes, and uneven terrain. Using string, flexible tape measure, or even the eyeball method, find the point at which the ground changes directions. A post must be placed anytime the overall slope of the ground direction changes for both downhill and uphill. Small variations like divots, bumps, or minor holes do not usually require special care. If your intended fence line is relatively flat, you simply place a post as needed based on the recommended spacing. If your fence line is on a consistent plane, then you will follow the contours of the ground while mounting the post in an upright and level position. If your fence line features significant changes in topography, then you will place a post anytime you have a significant change. Moving on to step 2, set your posts. For this step, you will use ground sleeves and a drive cap. To ensure your posts are in a straight line, it can help to run string between your endpoints and corner posts. Then you can easily set your ground sleeves using the guide string. The same string can be used later to ensure your spring-loaded arms are mounted at the same height. On your marked post location, you will drive ground sleeves using a heavy sledgehammer. Ground sleeves provide structural support for the posts, so it takes some effort to drive them into the ground. Patience and endurance will serve you well for this step. Insert the drive cap into the ground sleeve. With the crimped end of the sleeve on your mark, begin driving the sleeve into the ground. Try to keep the sleeve as level as possible while driving it. Adjustments can be made later if not perfect. It can be helpful to perform this step after a good rainfall, or you can wet the soil thoroughly prior to driving the sleeves. If your yard is prone to rocky or root-filled soil, consider using a metal soil probe to test for acceptable spots to drive the ground sleeves. Using a soil probe to find acceptable post locations. This soil probe tool is not included in our system. However, it can be found at most home improvement stores. It can be a great time saver for rocky or root-prone soil. Drive the sleeve until 1.5 inches is exposed above the ground. It is particularly important to drive the sleeves to this depth for corner posts and any posts that will hold gates. The top 1.5 to 2 inches of the ground sleeve should be exposed above the ground when driven to the correct depth. Continue driving sleeves for each location until all of your post locations have sleeves. Next, insert your posts into ground sleeves. For this step, you will use an 86-inch long post and a post cap. Keep in mind that if you have heavy-duty posts included in your installation, the components may look a bit different, but the installation process is the same. Insert a post into each ground sleeve. If you have difficulty getting the post inserted, reinsert the drive cap and gently hit the cap on the edges left to right on all sides to adjust the opening of the ground sleeve. Either before or after you insert your post into the ground sleeve, ensure that you place a post cap in the top of the post. Next, secure your ground sleeve to posts. Using a self-tapping screw and the included driver bit, secure the ground sleeve to the post. This prevents the post from spinning, which will be important later on during installation. Be sure to put 2 self-tapping screws on each post, 1 on each side. Next, level your posts. Using a level or the eyeball method, level each post by putting your foot at the base of the post, grip it tightly, and lean in the direction needed to level the post. Step 3. Prepare your spring-loaded arms and mounting couplers. For this step, you will use an arm mounting coupler, 2 set screws, spring-loaded arm, and a hex wrench. Begin by threading set screws with your fingers only on both sides of the arm mounting coupler. Just enough to hold them in place is sufficient. Then, insert the bottom of the spring-loaded arm into the smaller side of the arm mounting coupler. Next, slide the bottom of the spring-loaded arm into the coupler until the bottom is flush with the coupler. Then, tighten the set screw fully with the hex wrench. Be sure to check the alignment so that the mounting coupler is in line with the spring-loaded arm as shown. Repeat this process for all spring-loaded arms and mounting couplers. Before proceeding to the next step, ensure all of your spring-loaded arms and mounting couplers are connected and ready for mounting as shown. Attaching spring-loaded arms to posts. It is best to begin by mounting your spring-loaded arms on the corners first. Using a measuring tape, measure from the ground to find your desired mounting height. The mounting coupler should be mounted 12 inches below your desired finished height. The spring-loaded arm offers 12 inches of vertical height from wherever the mounting coupler is secured. The recommended finished height is 7 feet when measured from the ground to the tip of the spring-loaded arm. However, for the average domestic cat, you can lower the finished height to as little as 6 feet when necessary. Keep in mind the height of the spring-loaded arm is adjustable and can be easily changed by loosening the screw in the back and adjusting then retightening. For inside corners, the spring-loaded arm should be positioned in the center to point at a 45-degree angle. If the angle is anywhere between 90 and 180 degrees, then center the arm as shown in the diagram. For outside corners where the angle is anywhere between 181 and 270 degrees, use 2 spring-loaded arms on a single post to split the angle as shown in the diagram. String ran between corners can be helpful for placing arms on the same plane. This method works best on flat or consistently sloping terrain. For terrain that has significant changes in topography, you treat each pair of posts as its own section of fence, measuring off the ground to ensure the correct spring-loaded arm height. Once the spring-loaded arm is at the desired height and appropriate angle, fully tighten the set screw in the back of the mounting coupler. Continue mounting all spring-loaded arms to posts until all have been outfitted. Attaching a post and spring-loaded arm to a building. For this step, you will use an arm-to-wall strap and also a post-to-wall strap. When mounting to your home or building, it does not generally require a ground sleeve. You can use a nearby already installed post with a spring-loaded arm to mirror the height. Using 1 arm-to-wall strap and 2 post-to-wall straps, secure the post to the wall or building in the approximate locations shown. The process for securing straps to buildings and walls is the same regardless of the material type. The only difference is that you will select the fastener appropriate for the material type you're working with and make pilot holes as necessary. Once in position, use the included straps to mount the post to your home or building. Starting with the arm-to-wall strap, hold the strap in place and mark the opening on either side of the strap on the surface of the building. Next, prepare the holes for the fastener, which are not included, based on the building material. Pilot holes may be necessary for masonry, stucco, vinyl, aluminum, or wood. Next, secure the strap to the building with a fastener through each side. Move on to the installation of the post-to-wall strap. Before securing, ensure the post is level. 8 to 10 inches below the arm mounting coupler, fasten a post-to-wall strap over the post. Then, secure another 12 to 16 inches off the ground. Step 4. Attach mesh fencing to arms and posts. For this step, you will need standard zip ties. Also, the poly mesh fence roll. Standard zip ties are looped through the hole on the tip of the spring-loaded arm to initially connect the poly mesh fence material. Start by attaching the mesh to the tips of the starting spring-loaded arm with included standard zip ties. It is generally best to start in corners or on endpoints as shown here. With the first zip tie secured to the spring-loaded arm, roll out the mesh to the next corner. Going a few squares past the post, trim the mesh fencing in a straight vertical line. Next, attach the trim section to the tip of the spring-loaded arm. In corners, the spring-loaded arms do not stick out as far as elsewhere because it's turned at 45 degrees. Instead of connecting the mesh fencing on the edge, connect it down 4 squares as shown. Securing mesh on short spans. A side is considered a short span when only 2 posts make up that side. For example, shown above with the green square, where 2 posts make up a side going into a corner. The distance between 2 posts on a short span is going to be 14 feet or less, as that is the maximum distance between 2 posts. Going left to right between posts like a typewriter, start attaching the heavy-duty zip ties down the spring-loaded arm and post. Push the mesh fencing material back against the spring-loaded arm and post, doing your best to keep the mesh straight and smooth as you go left to right. When securing mesh to longer spans, it's a little different than on shorter spans. A longer span is defined by any time there's more than 2 posts on a side, or more than 1 section. In this example, there are 3 sections. Similar to shorter spans, move left to right between posts like a typewriter. The difference is you will start with the inline posts on longer spans rather than the endpoints or corners. Start attaching the heavy-duty zip ties down the spring-loaded arm and post as shown. Push the mesh fencing material back against the spring-loaded arm and post, doing your best to keep the mesh straight and smooth as you go. Notice how zip ties are not secured at this time below the arm on longer spans. This is intentional to make for easy adjustments later and for a more presentable appearance. Once you have the upper poly mesh secure on the section, trim the excess material away as shown. The top 4 squares are cut as shown to provide overlap on the corners. Moving away from the corner, unroll a few feet of poly mesh fencing and tack it in place with a zip tie. Unroll the mesh fence material all the way to the next corner or end point. You can generally lean the mesh against the last post. Then connect the top of the mesh fence material to the tip of the spring-loaded arms for each inline post between each end point or corner. Then cut the mesh fencing away from the roll at the end point or corner. Make sure you leave enough excess to fully go past the post. Next, head back to the starting end to begin using heavy-duty zip ties to secure mesh fencing. Completing the corner will be addressed later. If you notice excess mesh material or other issues, you can easily remove zip ties and reposition as needed. Now move back to complete the first corner. Remember to clip the excess tabs of all zip ties either as you go or at the end once you've completed a section. You can use our zip tie puller and cutter tool, which is not included but available for purchase. Or you can use snips as shown. A completed spring-loaded arm corner should look similar to this when completed. Next, let's review securing mesh in the corners. Any angle between 90 and 270 degrees will work with the Purrfect fence system. The diagram shows how the different angles are to be configured. When an angle is between 90 and 180 degrees, a single arm is used to split the angle. When an angle is between 181 and 270 degrees, it requires two arms on a single post to accomplish the same. Inside corners are formed by completing each side independently. Notice the shape the poly mesh fence is trimmed. This is done to be this way on both sides that make up the corner. Once both sides are completed and trimmed appropriately, there will be a rectangle-shaped overlap that extends from the tip of the arm. Alternatively, outside corners are handled slightly differently. Each side is still completed independently. The poly mesh fence material is cut to the end of the spring-loaded arms as shown. Lastly, a small piece of poly mesh fencing material is secured to complete the outside corner. Securing mesh on hills and uneven terrain. When addressing uneven terrain and hills, you simply need to consider abrupt changes in the slope of the underlying ground. You will treat each change in slope as its own section, fitting the upper poly mesh independently by cutting each end and starting over when the slope changes. For example, this would be considered one span or section because both posts represent the beginning or end of a significant slope change. This particular span and section is long enough to include multiple posts, but the upper poly mesh is fitted across the entire area without cutting or starting over because the slope is consistent. Using these guidelines, your Purrfect fence system can be adapted to any slope or hill within your enclosure area. Removing waviness and sag from between posts and spring-loaded arms. By using zip ties or a hog wringer tool, look down the line of fencing and use your fingers to squeeze together squares of mesh fencing to find the desired look. Then, use a zip tie or hog wringer to cinch that same square together to remove waviness and slack. It is important not to over-tighten as it can damage the spring-loaded arms. Repeat this process as necessary to get the desired look. Making these adjustments on the posts and spring-loaded arm better conceal them versus doing them in the open section between the posts. It may be necessary to cut away zip ties previously secured to make adjustments properly. Step 5. Attach chew and dig guard. For this step, you will need the roll of welded wire and zip ties. Begin by unrolling a few feet of wire mesh to get started. Attach the starting edge to the post using heavy-duty zip ties, leaving 2 to 3 squares, or 3 to 5 inches, more than you require past the bottom. This will be later bent into an L and staked down to create a seamless barrier along the ground. Next, unroll the wire mesh as you move toward the opposite corner. Next, cut the wire mesh entirely a few squares past the corner. Alternatively, you can make a more advanced technique by just cutting the first few squares at the bottom in order to bend the wire at the corner. Once positioned, secure the wire mesh to the post with heavy-duty zip ties. Next, begin connecting the wire mesh chew and dig guard to the upper mesh with the standard zip ties. Alternatively, you can use our hog wringer tool for this, which is available separately. A zip tie should be placed every other square, at least every 2 inches to avoid a gap that a cat may be able to exploit. Next, using your foot, press down along the edge to crease the wire at the point where it first meets the ground. You can choose to trim the excess tabs on zip ties either as you go or all at one time when the installation is complete. Instead of zip ties, hog rings and a hog ringer tool are available for purchase separately to speed installation and limit hand fatigue. Install ground stakes. For this step, you will need the ground stakes. Start by laying out ground stakes. They should be secured approximately 24 inches apart on flat to even ground. If you encounter bumpy or rolling ground, then you may require tighter stake spacing to properly pin down the dig and chew guard wire. Next, using a carpentry hammer, hammer the ground stakes into the ground position so the top holds down 2 strands of mesh wire. Repeat steps as necessary. This instructional video reviews completing spans of Purrfect fence. It is likely you have additional spans and you will repeat these steps for each span until your enclosure is completed. Before beginning to use your Purrfect fence, be sure to audit your fence line. Review each element to make sure that the mesh fencing material is secured correctly, no gaps exist that a cat could exploit, trim all excess zip ties, tabs, and fencing mesh, ensure there is nothing near the fence line that cats could leap from, and lastly, be sure to monitor your enclosure area closely for the first few weeks to see if your cats identify any potential areas you may have missed. If you are encountering an installation issue not addressed in this video, please get in touch with us. It is best if you can send a photo of the area with a description of the problem so we can more effectively assist you. You can send that email to help@purrfectfence.com for assistance.